Hello, everyone. Welcome to AI on Air podcast. Today, it's the Ep.9, Co-Build the Future of Agentic Internet with PayPal. And today, we're very honored to welcome GC Jonathan from PayPal Enterprise team. And Alan used to be the partner at PayPal Venture, right now the partner at M12 Microsoft Ventures. So welcome to the episode with Scott and me. And today we would love to start talking about, again, agentic internet, agentic payments, PYUSD, stablecoins, and so on and so forth. So from that perspective, GC and Adam, do you guys want to give a quick self-intro to the audience first?
Yeah, I'll go first. Thanks for having both of us on the call. Alan and I have worked together closely for a little while now, so it's good to be on the screen with him again. I'm JC. Friends call me JC, so you can include yourself in that. I lead enterprise product growth here at PayPal. And what that means is I work with some of the world's largest merchants, specifically on how they can maybe reimagine payments as a growth lever rather than just a part of their infrastructure. As you can imagine, a lot of that recently has had to do with agentic commerce and navigating this kind of new frontier. So looking forward to a great conversation this morning.
Yeah, thanks, JC. Feelings very much mutual. Definitely a privilege to work with you at PayPal. And as she mentioned, my name's Alan Du. I'm currently a partner at M12, which is Microsoft's venture arm. Prior to joining M12, I spent the last five odd years at PayPal Ventures, which is PayPal's venture arm, covering I would say the intersection between fintech and AI. So today's topic is super relevant. Really excited for this conversation.
Awesome. So given that, again, the key topic today is about agents and agentic commerce and the internet, we'd love to start with the definition of this thing. So maybe Mike to JC about what do you think about this idea of a lot of people, especially in Silicon Valley, talk about agentic web, agentic internet is coming. And of course, at PayPal, a lot of the focus in the initiative at agentic commerce, it's actually still a very new topic and idea to a lot of people. What do you think about, what's to you this definition mean, and how did you describe this shift, and where did you start seeing the starting point from and everything? So would love to hear your insights about this.
Yeah, it's amazing. We're basically almost a year into this new world of agentic commerce, and really, agentic as a part of our kind of everyday conversations. I think there's a lot of debate on what that actually means, and I think there's probably also equal debate on kind of what level of agentic is actually happening today. I think at a really high level, agentic is when an agent acts on behalf of a user, where historically, user would navigate a website, tap and click around, if you will, to have some kind of an action. Maybe that equals purchasing something from a commerce standpoint. Now agentic is delegating those actions to the agent to act on your behalf. And so there definitely are examples of that we see today. There's great agent to agent interaction. I think agentic commerce, if you're kind of really look at what I would call the pure definition of, full delegation to an agent to go and purchase something on your behalf. I think we're not seeing a lot of that. I would call, I like to say we see a lot of agentic-like transactions, which are still very much human in the loop as we continue to build the infrastructure that's needed to deliver these full agentic commerce experiences. But I think what's really critical is that this is not a what if it happens. It is happening as we speak, and it's a little bit more about how we respond and ultimately build what this agentic future is going to look like. And so, super exciting times. I know we're going to dig into a lot of these topics here this morning, but I think this shift from users, humans going through and doing all of the work and the taps and the clicks, if you will, we're starting to already see that shift to agents doing those actions on behalf of users, and I think it's super exciting.
That's awesome. So actually, you touched one thing that you mentioned is one of the topics I really want to expand later on and dive into the details, especially given the, Alan as an investor who spent a lot of time in this space as well. Because you mentioned that at this moment, the agentic interaction or commerce still has a lot of human in the loop process, and we would love to discuss or spend some time to explore what makes that still happening. What is the kind of the infrastructure that is needed to really make sure that autonomous agents is coming one day. But before we go into that, would love to hear from Alan, your perspective that, as an investor, obviously, look a lot. And we also look at a lot of the agentic companies that, across payments, identity, cybersecurity perspective. So how did you view companies like us or others that you are aware of to really being part of this emergence of agent-driven commerce? And what excites you most about it, and how did you see that those agentic-driven commerce or agentic commerce really shaping the future broad, scope and concept of payments, identity, and all this stuff?
Yeah, I think it's a topic that could probably take way beyond the time available for this podcast. But I love to geek out over this, as JC and you guys are probably well aware. I love geeking out over this topic, and because it gets me so excited. But back to kind of what you alluded to earlier, and what JC alluded to earlier is that when you really kind of dig deep into what does it mean to be agentic, right? Currently, what we're seeing is sort of this, partial agency or partial delegation, right? Not just from a what can the agent do perspective, but also who are the agents or what are the agents, right? Meaning that the very identity of the agent. Now, is the agent borrowing identity from a human, or does the agent have its own identity, thereby having a lot more agency to be able to act and do things, right, in a truly autonomous sense, right? So I think the current identity infrastructure that we built, right, so we can get into the KYCs and all that fun identity access management piece, which is a whole other topic on its own. But there lacks a infrastructure that's built, identity infrastructure that's built for agents, like agent native identity, right? And this is, I think, beginning to get into really interesting territories where do we need a completely new or redesign of how, like we talk about the agentic web, right? Does the agentic web require a complete redesign of identity infrastructure, right? What does it mean for agents to exist? And does the agent need to continue to borrow identities from human users, or can the agents have some kind of a permanent identity or almost a credit score, right? Similar to how we humans have a FICO score, right? With which you can do a lot more, right? Apply for a credit card, apply for a loan, and things like that, right? And also for agents to be able to recognize each other, right? To be able to conduct transactions more freely with one another, even if they don't really previously know each other already, but based on that quote unquote FICO score, they're able to make transactions, right, within a certain preset limit, so they don't go completely haywire and go mint $300 trillion of stable coins. I think again, I'll stop there, but I do think this is the part where really we're beginning to enter completely new territory, and it's a big space that I think folks are beginning to chase after, but it's a wide open space with a lot of opportunities.
Actually, given that, Alan, you say this is the beginning and a big opportunity, this is where I want to get into a little bit spicy about my question, given that's where you guys come from. So you probably saw in the last 6 months, there's a crazy amount of announcement from very big companies. Everybody want to get into agentic commerce and payments. And I think PayPal, of course, actually is one of the earliest one that launched the agentic toolkits to really allow your merchants to launch the agents and be able to have users to interact with and make payments for the goods. But also then soon, we saw that Coinbase launched X42, and then there's tons of partnership they made an announcement with, and even they work with Cloudflare, who launched their own stablecoin for agent payment actually. And Google of course launched their A2A and also like AP2 agent payment protocol. And recently Visa very recently launched their like a trust agent protocol. How did you feel? I think PayPal definitely is, putting a lot of resources and a lot of, focus right now, but also there's like a lot of, I would say, attention and resources also put into this.
I think it's good news. Absolutely, right? I mean, for something of this magnitude to really happen and be received by the broader, whether it's consumers or institutions, you need somebody to lead the charge. And a lot of times it's a lot of somebody's, right? And it's really, really important that the folks that are leading the charge are well-respected, large institutions who pay a lot of attention to security, pay a lot of attention to a compliance side of things, right? Because whenever we do deal with new emerging technologies, you bet there are also bad actors trying to take advantage of those, right? So it's really important for the Googles, the PayPals, the Coinbase, the what have yous of the world, the really important actors come together and put their brains together and say, this is new technology that we unanimously agree that is important, that is going to be transformative, and we're going to do so in a responsible way. So everybody launching their own products and kind of, within really short span of time is absolutely important, and sending a strong signal that this is something we're paying attention to and we're taking seriously. So it's absolutely a positive signal for at least folks like me who are actively investing in this area.
And Alan, sorry, go ahead, JC.
What I was gonna add was, I think it's also a really important time for us collectively to define the boundaries of the system, if you will, right? There's a lot of, known unknowns and unknown unknowns, and a lot of areas that we need to figure out as we think about, a completely new way in which money's going to move, a completely new way in which purchases are going to happen, in which just actions are going to happen, in general, more broadly. And so I think it's really good for this kind of proliferation of thought that happens, through protocols and press releases. I think we need to figure out, in the same way that solutions like MCP have helped us think through, standardization that will make it much easier for interoperability. I think there's a similar opportunity for us collectively as, an industry to think about, how do we make sure that we don't bifurcate or split, even worse, the ways in which we can kind of build this future. We need to make sure that we are defining those boundaries, finding ways for those boundaries to then create opportunity in areas that are safe, secure, going to drive trust with consumers. And so I think, to Alan's point, I would agree. I think it's really good. I think there's a lot of work still to be done to make sure that we aren't kind of splitting away from each other, but in fact, what we're doing is actually building the system in a way that's going to be interoperable across all of our surfaces.
And I agree. I think I agree both with JC and Alan here. ID and governance is actually one of the most important things, and interoperable is actually one of the most important traits we need to implement. Because if you look at the existing MCP user experience, if you're using ChatGPT and then you want to use, like for example, Google services, Gmail services, and if you want to link your ChatGPT with another one, maybe like Jira, ClickUp in this case, you need to do integration one by one. That's actually M times N user experience in terms of authentication in this case. For example, if you switch from ChatGPT to Perplexity, or if you switch Perplexity from cloud, in this case, you need to redo all this work again. And then, so it's not interoperable in this case, and the authentication and authorization has tons of issues. And another thing here is that I think it's not as simple as that now I need to delegate my ID and reputation to my agent. Actually, every single agent depends on who produced the agent, who built the agent, and even depends on the virtual agent, operates very differently. For example, your ChatGPT agent probably going to operate very different than then your cloud agent maybe probably going to operate very different than Perplexity agent in this case. And then this is actually pretty important. And then so that's why I think if when you in the future world, I believe majority of things will be done by agent, like 95 or 99% of things will delegate to the agent and done by agent. And then agent's reputation is actually come from two parts. Who produced the agent? For example, it could be like an OpenAI's ChatGPT 5 in this case. In that case, it shares some reputation from ChatGPT 5's reputation. It shares some common pattern from ChatGPT 5. And who own the agent in this case? Because who own the agent may have bad intention, even though it's all come from ChatGPT. It may come from a different intention for that. And the most important thing, when we working, cryptographic and the ID part, where does the bottom turtle for this ID come from in this case? For example, who actually provide the most bottom, like a bottom ID verification? Who is the ID issuer? Who is the credential issuer for this is actually pretty important. And that's actually what Kite AI is building for in this case. So every user has an ID in this case, and this ID is issued, could be like issued by PayPal, and could be the ID issued by Gmail in this case. And then when you log into ChatGPT, you actually have the, for example, JC's ChatGPT is going to be different than Alan's cloud in this case. And then each of these will be, ID verified. For example, JC ChatGPT may be ID verified by PayPal, and Alan's cloud may be ID verified by Gmail in this case. But when you talk about this agent, it actually shares reputation from both sides, from both the agent provider and also the user. Combine these two, you actually have a unique trace for the agent. Even though it's not 100%, not guaranteed, it probably still will change because the version change, but it's relatively stable in this case. At the end of the day, it's a regular between, it's a balance between the agent and the user. That's what Kite AI designed the architecture for.
Yeah, and actually on top of what Scott mentioned, one thing that I always find a lot of, we as a startup received a lot of questions from people say, oh, so how do you see like now, again, like X42 standard that launched by Coinbase, like Visa recently again launched that, and Google, A2A, AP2. And actually that is where I completely agree with what Alan and JC, you guys mentioned. It's a very collaborative, collective effort that's especially from reputable and credible enterprises or like big companies who take the effort and the responsibility to help shape the future standard of like agentic internet and agentic commerce. So that's why to us, honestly, like as a startup, we know that a lot of times for like especially very, very most fundamental standards usually come from like big companies like Google, like PayPal, like like the PayPal of the world, or even like Coinbase of the world, to help shape that. And then a lot of like the innovations come from the ecosystems to help pushing, building the infrastructure and applications product on top of that. So very exciting to see how the future of the agentic commerce will be evolving very soon. Yeah, and I think this is like to me, it's almost like one of the ChatGPT moments that every single like 2 weeks there's some new standard and new protocols comes out from people. So very exciting time. Yeah, and from that perspective, Jonathan, actually, even before you were at PayPal, you're already a payment expert. So I'm very curious about how did you see, like from like just like payment perspective, that the current technology or like the agentic technology will be influencing the mainstream like payment experience, and on top of that, the commerce experience. If you have to, for example, like even say one big thing that you think it will be changing or like helping the human society, what is the killer use case you see that will really take the agentic commerce mainstream, and what would that be?
So I think it's a great question. I think it's important to start from kind of first principles. If you think about just, payments in the current state and how they've existed for the past, couple decades, there are parts of the system that work really, really well. And so while we are in many ways building the future, there are absolutely, best practices. There is scalable infrastructure. There are components of an existing system that we should really look to ensure that we don't kind of lose a lot of the resiliency and, quite honestly, the protections that are built into that system. So if you think about maybe 3 pillars around commerce, or if you think about kind of the jobs to be done related to payments, we've talked about identity already. I think, critical component today, payments has a lot to do with, something you have, something type framework to understand, does this individual have the right to use this financial instrument? And there's a lot of systems that are built around that today to look at how we would leverage, for example, at PayPal, we have 800 plus AI ML models that look at every transaction to make sure that it is, in fact, a legitimate transaction. And we should try to lean on those types of systems as much as possible in this new world, because they work and they've been built and battle tested for years and years and years. At the same time, it doesn't mean that we can't look at ways to upgrade or augment our infrastructure with new advancements. Stablecoins obviously are a great example of that. Where we have the opportunity, using, card rails or bank rails today, we have a totally new opportunity to move money, in a really fast, secure, low cost way with stablecoins. And so we have the opportunity to think about how do these, kind of new available options to us advance the system. And I think third is, how do we think about now orchestrating a little bit of the old with the new, if you will, for lack of a better term, where, when we think about agentic commerce, it's not just about the payment moment. There's an entire life cycle that needs to happen. We as consumers are familiar or, kind of expect certain things to happen related to commerce. And a great example of that is, how do we make sure that, the receipt for my purchase shows up in my inbox or inside of, for example, my PayPal wallet, so that if there is a question about when's the item going to show up, or if there's an issue with something, for example, around maybe a refund or a dispute, that it falls into a lot of the norms that consumers are used to kind of working within. So I think while there's incredible opportunity ahead of us, and we should be so excited about, I'll call it the new tools that we have to build this future, we can really lean on and learn from an existing system that moves, as we talked about, trillions of dollars, globally in a safe, secure, and verifiable way. Selfishly, I love the idea of kind of what is that killer use case. For me, there's a bunch. I think the benefit of this kind of agentic move is, how do we reduce the cognitive load that we as a consumer or a user need to go through in order to achieve some action? I think my favorite version, I travel a lot, is I want to go to the airport to catch my flight. I don't necessarily have too much affinity for one ride sharing service versus another, but what I want is the outcome. So any use case that's very kind of specific to an outcome, how do I get to that outcome with the least amount of cognitive load as possible? So I want to be able to say, get me a ride to the airport for my flight. And the connectivity required to make that happen is complex. And so that's why these systems are going to take a while to happen. But the outcome is, I shouldn't have to open up a bunch of different apps and figure out which app has the better car that's going to be able to show up faster and has the optimal price, and which one of those apps has, do I have rewards in, which payment instrument do I want to use related to that. But then we can go one step further and we think about connectivity. I fly United and I fly out of SFO, and that's like a known, part of me as a user, if you will. And so that should be implemented as a part of this. My calendar can be connected. So the agent can know what time my last meeting is versus what time my flight is and how long it's going to take to get there. And it can just kind of schedule all of that on my behalf. And as a user, that just gets me the outcome I want with the least possible amount of input from me, because it's pulling from personalization signals within the other systems that are a part of the life that I manage. And so to me, that's also where, when those types of use cases start to become reality, we'll see kind of the S-curve of adoption, I think, really take off, going from a lot of really very fun and quite cool experiences that we can see today that are, I would call it like agentic light, to, you know, really solving a problem or really delivering a high value outcome when there's very low lift needed from the user. So I'm definitely excited about when that's going to be here. And I know it's a ways off, but it's also fun to know that we're building the rails and building the future to get us there.
I completely agree, JC. I think the personal agent probably is the biggest opportunity in the next 10 to 15 years. I think it's bigger than iPhone in this case. And then maybe the whole user interface need to design, the user agent interaction interface need to be designed. Actually, not, you know, when you talk about that case, I think there are probably only 4 or 5 companies are capable of building this personal agent. Apple may be one, you know, in this case, OpenAI may be one in this case. And all the service provider need to integrate with this personal agent gens, and then to make sure they have this end-to-end user experience. Actually, almost every single service provider for this, a little bit scared because now previously they are traffic entry point. For example, if I'm ordering Uber, I open Uber app, and then I interact with Uber app. Uber can, selectively provide ad service for this and profit more from it because they are traffic entry point. But if this personal agent going to dominate this, it will actually not be able to provide this traffic entry point in this case. And then, we could look at a completely new world where we have a larger, bigger than iPhones industry, a company, maybe even bigger than Apple in this case, going to surface, and then these everyone's traffic entry point, and most of people are going to delegate most of the work to this personal agent. In this case, I think something is like this is coming. Another opinion here, I think is very interesting. You didn't mention it explicitly, but I believe you probably think of the same way, is that stablecoin is actually the native currency for agent in this case, because every single agent, what I see for every single agent, you can think of it like a programmer. Like they are looking for API they can use. They're looking for resource they can use. They're searching for internet. They're like programmer. If they provide them an API they can use, it's much easier for them to use. For digital currency or stable coin, it's like a programmable money. It naturally provide an interface for agent to interact with, and then to program around, and then to, based on their needs, proposing a contract or escrow contract between service provider and the personal agent in this case. So that's why I think digital currency or stable coin will be the native currency for agent. That's the whole Kite AI is built on top of the agentic payment. Yeah, that's my opinion here.
And I'll I'll jump in here, and I think what's really also interesting is beyond the same future. I think JC was super excited about. I hope for the day that I could just automate my entire trip planning, booking an Uber, booking a pickup, hotel, all that stuff is solved for. Like, I spend so much time just going through that. But what's really important in the future, I think, is also as we go beyond sort of the traditional commerce, meaning buying a pair of shoes, buying a coffee maker on Amazon or on whatever individual merchant, there's a increasing, and I think it's already a massive industry around paying for compute, right? The GPU cloud, right? Paying for model access, paying for data access. And I was joking with somebody the other day, and I said, hey, we pay for data the same way we pay for software 20, 30 years ago. It's a perpetual license, right? A massive giant license, right? You get access to this much data, and the data, you probably use 5 to 10% of it, if that, and the data gets stale very quickly, right? So how do we kind of SaaSify, if you will, access to data, access to model, right? Access to compute, right? How do we track usage far more granularly, right? Real usage-based, real-time streaming payment, right? And I know this is something that I think many companies like PayPal are beginning to think about. And then there absolutely needs to be toolkits for tracking those usages, for making those payments in real time, most probably in some cases, if not most cases, in fractions of a penny, right? Because we're running micro tasks in real time. And traditional rails sometimes may not be able to handle that, right? So you probably will have some kind of a multi-rail system where those type of tasks will default over to the stablecoin rails to be able to make those fractional payments. So I think that's a whole brand new venue for payment technology such as stablecoin to go after, and that could be a massive value unlock.
First of all, I think all of you three guys said, shared very good insights and honestly, like the future vision about how things should work. And first of all, I think, JC, what you mentioned about the payment stuff or agentic commerce go beyond payments is something really hit my heart because I still remember in May, I was at the PayPal Dev Day. And a lot of the, honestly, even though the topic is about agentic commerce, but I think even like among that 3 days, I learned so much from you guys about how, like you say, like dispute, for example, invoice management, and even Venmo guy was sharing about how they're using agents to facilitate like the recommendation from friends on like restaurants and all the stuff that's facilitated further by the agentic payments and all the stuff, which actually I do think takes a lot of the domain expertise that's go beyond just to say the payment itself, which is actually, first of all, I really love what you say that the commerce side is a very comprehensive experience that's require the coverage from end to end for end users to really have smooth experience there. And on top of that, Scott, Alan all talked about stablecoin being like the native currency for the future agentic, like again, payments and money, which I think is, of course, like like the very big bets that Kai is making. And I do think a lot of other people are making that as well. That's also why like Stripe, for example, launched their own layer one blockchain temple to really being the general purpose stablecoin blockchain for future payments, global payment system. And I do think also PayPal, for example, like do a lot of stuff on PYUSD side. And it's a pity that today David is not with us, so probably we'll have Alan, for example, or GC help cover some of the stablecoin part. But also another thing, GC, this is from my like a selfish perspective that I do want to know from your perspective. That again, as a payment expert, you probably are very aware of there's multiple methods that people can use for payments, right? Like credit card, virtual card, payment tokenization, and stablecoin, for example. So, and also now you're in the very front line of this agentic payment and commerce side. Did you see like people are adopting different methods in parallel? Like for example, like if we use Stripe as an example, they even push both together, right? Like the virtual card integration with OpenAI recently for that commerce shopping experience. And on the other side, they also launched Temple for stablecoin payments in the future and all this stuff. So curious from your firsthand experience, did you like see that still people are pushing that different method in parallel? Did you see any shift, or what's your kind of like a envision of the future?
Yeah, payments is an interesting space. I'll do maybe like a little fun walk through history. If we think about the progression of kind of where we were to where we are, many of the people listening probably weren't born yet, but there was a time where you had a physical card and you would put it on a little machine and you would slide a carbon copy receipt over the top of it, and it would take an imprint of the card, physically imprint the card so you could see the numbers, which is why you have raised numbers on a lot of cards still, the older cards. And they used to call those knuckle busters. And so like that machine is what was needed to verify that card was used at that time, so that the bank would release the funds between, to another bank, right? So like think about that and related to where we are now, where you can walk up and, tap your phone and using biometrics, the device, recognizes you, trusts that it's you, and that transaction can be underwritten. So like, just think of that advancement from literally physical carbon copy pieces of paper over to where, we are today with, NFC, based payments that are happening. Or you can even now think about, We have payments that are moving to more kind of, palm, like we've seen in grocery stores, or even facial recognition as well. So we're, massive advancements in what we've seen, even just in card payments alone. And when we think about digital, you have the raw PAN, which no one wants to touch because of PCI compliance. But there was a time where that was relatively common to type that into a form field on a website, and that's really a major role that PayPal played early on. Was people trusted PayPal to secure that card number so that they didn't have to give it to the random website out on the internet as that was emerging. And so all of those things just give us a little bit of a view into the types of major changes that can actually happen when we think about these new advancements. So I do think that a lot of the new use cases that will emerge and are emerging with Agentic, kind of force us to rethink, do we have the right tools to enable these new use cases? A great example, we kind of alluded to around, where stablecoins play isn't just in the stored value movement and the benefits of that. But if we think about microtransactions and the importance of microtransactions for things like access to content, or using microtransactions to validate identity, these are things that have really been elusive because of the high cost of moving money through what we would call some traditional rails. And so all of a sudden we have new use cases that maybe have always been around as ideas, or maybe have been very novel, that now become really critical to enabling this new future. So if I'm a content creator and I want my content to be available to be reviewed or read or maybe leveraged, how do I make sure that I can monetize that in some way, maybe in kind of a RAG model where, if someone accesses my content, I get, a couple, pennies as a part of that. And every time an agent accesses my report, if you will, I'm very happy to let them do that, but I want to get paid for it. And, it's not going to be $10. It might be 10 cents, but over time that could be real meaningful revenue. But it's only possible because of these new technologies we have, new infrastructure, and stablecoin, I think, is a great example of that. So I couldn't agree more in kind of where we're going. And certainly, you all are better at this than I am. So we'd love to hear your perspective as well.
And I completely agree with you, JC, here, is that all the existing infrastructure are built for humans. Think about payment, like almost every single payment today require like 30 cents plus 3% fee in this case. It's not built for agent. And then in my definition, when we build this, we actually build every single infrastructure for agent native in this case, like agent native ID, agent native payment, and agent native like governance and authentication. That's actually Katia is building for. And then in terms of the paper API access or paper data access, it's actually more naturally for agents. Because, for example, if you want to do a research, you can ask me or agent do a research. Agent don't need to, agent probably need to pull the data from this API. Agent need to access Wall Street journals for one article for like less 0.1 cents and to do some research. Agent probably need to call Google, search for particular data, and then at the end of the day, it's probably talk through like 10 different places and get the data, get the API, and I know they do a research. This is actually very agent native activity. But today, you cannot support this because you don't have infrastructure support this access. You don't have infrastructure support payment. In this case, you don't want to pay $30 a month to Google, $40 a month for Wall Street journals and to at agent to access. You want something paper usage access, something like this.
Yeah, that's the fun is, this group here gets to build all of the things that are needed to enable that. So Alan, I know you just came off mute, but I think it's just such an exciting time.
Yep.
Yeah.
I couldn't agree more. What's really interesting also is as we think about, I think JC, you mentioned this earlier at the beginning of the call, where there's a massive UI shift, right? Where you see an increasing percentage of the traffic instead of coming from this me typing in something in the Google search bar. Now it's pulling results through GPT, through Claude, and sometimes it's summarizing results. And you kind of, by reading the output of that, you're breaking the attribution chain, right? and thereby the traceability of where that information comes from. Now, but if you put that into sort of a consumption model where you're reading an article, right? You're reading an article written by someone, you're consuming content, proprietary content that's generated by an artist, by someone whose livelihood depends on that, right? Who wants to get paid for that. And how do you then appropriately pay that person or pay that entity, right? And maintain the traceability of that. And I think as we go further along in that UI shift, right? We have to have tool sets that maintain that sort of lineage. So I think stablecoin could be potentially a very useful tool in that.
Yeah, so Alan, actually, that is where the very interesting conversations I remember we had in the very beginning of the year. So I do remember like one of the big reasons why in the end, we felt like a good match, and you led the round for us was also the strong belief of the future sort of like the agent native money or like payment rail and identity rail that we need to support here beyond just the like human centric operations that agent will help human to do, but also like very machine native operations in the future. For example, like the data example you mentioned, right? A human probably is not going to be even like nowadays, it's already not human reading those data. To be honest, right? It's the foundation model that's reading those data. But a lot of times right now, if we think about foundation model, if we want them to access the data, as long as the data is not being like processed in the pre-training stage or like fine-tuning stage, they essentially is a data outside of the model. And right now with this like massive UI shift that's probably have the agent be the native like interface for human to work with, then it will be the agent now, that machine to really access those data sets or like partial of the data sets. And actually I'm curious, like besides the data sets perspective or like the data, right, is there any like other very interesting use cases that you see like the agentic payments is going into, right? Like agentic commerce right now, to me, a lot of times we're still thinking about human mimic or human alike type of operations like shopping, for example. But besides that, anything else that's caught your eye or you see people are doing interesting things right now?
I'll let JC go first. I think he came up first.
Yeah, it's funny. You think selfishly about what are the things that you wish you could automate in your life. I am, in a lot of these conversations like we're having here, I think I definitely have heard a pretty interesting shift to a realization that the B2B use cases are the ones that may actually be more near term, especially kind of agent to agent use cases. And so I think through like what are the things that kind of happen from a business perspective or like in a true business or maybe in the business of your life that just make a lot of sense to kind of offload fully to an agent. I love the example of think about you have I don't have a car anymore, but you have a car and at some point you need to get new tires, and I'm not a tire expert, but at some point, your car has a ton of data on your driving patterns. It knows when you put your last tires on, it knows if it knows what kind of tires you have, it then knows how long the tires would last. And it can track that, and it can also be monitoring maybe the sales of the tire places around where you live. It can know your schedule so that when it makes sense to maybe go in and get your tires changed, it can apply a coupon that's related to a certain brand that maybe you have an affinity to. And even more exciting, that instead of you having to go and sit in the lobby and wait for that service, your car just drives itself, to the appointment, while you're on a meeting and gets the tires and it's paid for agentically, and all of that kind of just happens. I do think those kind of use cases are maybe closer than we think because we have, intelligent systems built into many of the products that are around us today, whether it's our refrigerator or it's our coffee maker, or it's our cars. They are collecting data all the time, and we have new systems to analyze that. So I do think that like you could think about that use case and probably apply it to anything. You could think about, you're going to make the coffee based on your schedule. It's going to auto order, right? All of those things. And that I think can just be kind of deeply embedded in the background of our lives. And then we'll interact with it to maybe tweak or make adjustments, or maybe kind of rate the interaction so that, more of the good and less of the bad, if you will. But overall, I think that, those use cases are probably not getting as much airtime because, at the same time, as Alan mentioned, we all also want to book that perfect vacation and have that beautiful discovery experience lead to it just being booked as well. And in both cases, they leverage the same infrastructure. But the agent to agent side, it feels like that's going to be an area that expands because of the efficiency it will drive within businesses itself that are really investing in those areas. But I know we all kind of came off at the same time off mute, and so would love to hear someone else's perspective.
That perfect vacation idea couldn't come soon enough because my wedding anniversary is coming up, so I definitely need some help in that area. But I think, look, the data piece I think will be a massive value unlock, right? And this is why I got so excited about it. But it's going to take some time. It's going to take some time. Not only because, one, I think organizations and even individual consumers and citizens are beginning to realize the data that we each own and we continue to produce, right? The proprietary data is valuable, right? And data's new oil, right? That's been sort of the cliche in the last few years. But how do you, one, get that oil out of the ground? How do you build a refinery? How do you then build a supply chain? How do you then build sort of the consumption ecosystem? That's going to take some time, right? Both on the infrastructure side, but also on a sort of a consumer behavior standpoint. But in the near term, I think there will be, like JC alluded to, other use cases that this technology can immediately help, particularly around, for example, how we pay for compute, right? How we pay for model access, right? As more people become developers, right? By vibe coding, right? And you can just open up a Lovable and become a coder all of a sudden, build your own software. Okay, now I put this out in the wild and somebody's going to use it. And how do I get paid for it, right? So I think there are still new venues, but are far more immediate in the meantime that people can essentially benefit from this technology by maintaining that traceability, by maintaining that sort of the programmability of oh, you use my model, boom, okay, let's do instant settlement. That's maintain that traceability and eliminate any sort of counterparty risk in that process. And this is all the values that stablecoin based payment can potentially provide.
That's very correct. Anything, Scott, that you want to share, or I'll share my thoughts first?
Go ahead first. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, sure. So actually, first of all, I think, JC, what you mentioned reminded literally a conversation we had with Asia-based conglomerate. It's a manufacturing company that they started the agentic payments use case from very B2B perspective. That they're using, instead of like using agent to shop for like clothes or like a grocery as for individual consumers, they use agent to shop for like the car auto parts globally, and using stablecoin to pay for that because there are so many countries that they need to shop across, and they're like, oh, the currency part is actually a big pain point to us. That's why to them, like actually using like a stablecoin based solution for this type of agentic payments is a perfect sort of like starting experiments for them. And then on top of that is what exactly you mentioned, that because it's a conglomerate that they are not only doing the manufacturing of the auto part, like the thing on top of the auto parts, but they actually produce the car and they need to sell to the consumer side. And how they sell to the consumer side is actually they're using a lot of like the personalized data they collected from their, their consumers who used to have like the car purchasing history or like some other preference history they have, and then they use that they use that as the data points for them to do the best recommendation. And that sometimes is come to actually like the specific dates they find, oh, it's the the preferred, is the good date for them to make this recommendation to their user, which actually tie to that, like a future use case you mentioned about, oh, now you can even have that car probably being, drive into those like auto shop by themselves to do the detailing and all the other stuff, which I just found the future could be very exciting. That's automated by agent from end to end literally. Yeah. I just this just reminded me of that conversation I had with them. And another thing that actually, Alan, you mentioned about the database really reminded me. Both Scott and I come from like the data infrastructure background. I used to work at Databricks, and Scott used to be the engineering committee chair at Uber, to overseeing a lot of their infrastructure building in-house, which I absolutely agree with what Alan you mentioned. Even though we all, as data geeks, very, very agree that data is the absolute new oil for the future AI, or even like agentic internet. There's still a lot of like missing from the infrastructures that really make the data consumption, or like the fractional data economy to come. For example, like how you can even like have the agent to be able to consume the unstructured data in real time is one of the hottest topic among like data infra people this year, to really help facilitate the context, the context layer for the agents. And then with that, now the agent can consume the data, make the discovery, and then make the decision, and then make the payments, which I think is what we all think that's, need to happen to be able to really have the autonomous agentic commerce. But I think even though there's still some like the gap in this process, but say the progress is also very, very fast at the moment, and we definitely will see a lot of the exciting use cases that have been emerged very soon.
Well, I think that, I'll just quickly jump in here. I think a few months ago we all saw that that announcement that came out of was it JP Morgan, who said, "Hey, Plaid, you can no longer access our consumer data freely," right? And all of a sudden, a few months later, they reversed that announcement and said, "Hey, we signed a renewed data access contract," right? So the first announcement shows you that organizations are very quickly realizing this is our oil. This is our proprietary resource, right? And sometimes this is our competitive advantage, probably the only one that we have left, right? As more and more technology become available and commoditized. And then the reversal of that also indicates that maybe they didn't come up with a sort of the solution just yet, so they have to and sort of extend that, right? But this is all my personal speculation, of course. But I do think that people are coming to the realization, but the ecosystem isn't quite there yet, right? So it's still going to take some time, and I think the space is still wide open.
I want to jump in on this part, like a little bit on the agent-to-agent side, and probably this evolution of the agent as well. So I think from what I observed from the research papers mentioned, I think performance and accuracy of agent is actually improved very fast. Like there is a paper published like earlier this year, like 3 months ago. Like the agent is double its performance every 7 to 9 months. It's improving at exponential speed. That's one thing. On the other hand, the cost for agent is dropping like 80% per year for last 3 years straight. So the same output from ChatGPT like 3 years ago, now it costs only like 1% to get the same output, like in this case. But what I say from limiting is actually the part is the speed of the agent. That, for example, if you have agent do the work for you, in this case, when I called my local personal agent, help me order Uber Eats, it takes 5 minutes to actually complete the work, because you need to process this so many tokens, like throughput of the token processing. I don't think that part is going to be improved very quickly. I think probably that's one of the slowest improving area bottleneck for the agent for the foreseeable future, because the agent throughput, from what I see, is actually become not even faster. But I didn't see any sign to become any faster. So that's probably the bottleneck, what I say, for agent-to-agent interaction.
Yeah, we have spent so much time talk about like the promising and exciting future about agentic commerce and payments. I actually, before we wrap up this a very interesting and insightful conversation, I would love to dive into a little bit I would say like the mistakes were like the concerning part that we want to avoid if you guys have some thoughts, because to me every technology itself is, no matter how disruptive it could be, but there are also still some part that's like we hope that we don't repeat the mistakes that in the last cycle of the internet or technology. So I'm just curious from again, like JC and Alan, you guys said observations and current experience firsthand. Anything that's right now you felt like is still could be a big challenge, or like some of the things that you felt just you want to make sure that we address that along the way.
Yeah, I'll start. I know Alan will have a perspective on this. I think if we go back to first principles, when we think about commerce, we need to know who the buyer is and who the seller is. And the benefit of all these great advancements that we see today is that we can go vibe code a website, and we can vibe code a totally new product, and all of the advancements that we have available to us through these great IDEs and what the LLMs are building right into their infrastructure for us to leverage. So all of that is great, but the challenge is all of the bad actors have the same tools, if not better, than we do as well. So the ability to spin up effectively a false merchant, the ability to spin up false IDs, the ability to spin up that at scale is that much easier than it used to be previously. And so we have to really continue to lean on, I think, many of the best practices that we have, and many of the protocols that are coming out are really continuing to lean into that. I think Google's AP2 is a great example of that, of really making sure that there's a clear understanding of how we delegate identity as a part of that. So if we get that right, we create a beautiful, trusted experience. If we get it wrong, you have the ability to leverage stolen financial instruments at scale, or sell products at scale that don't actually exist. And so we think about this a lot at PayPal because we have a view into both sides of the network, consumers and buyers. And so we have kind of a unique way to think about this across our entire ecosystem. And we're spending a lot of time, as you can imagine, investing in how we allow others to leverage that infrastructure to ensure that trust and identity are kind of baked in at the base layer, if you will, for the ecosystem. But I think back to that kind of really basic, simple kind of thought of who's the buyer and who's the seller, and how do we make sure that's clearly a part of what we're building for the future. And I know, Alan, we've talked about this before, but would love to hear your perspective.
Yeah, and I think, the word trust really strikes at the very heart of this, right? Any new technology, particularly technology that touches money, right? Touches wealth, touches multiple parties' money and wealth, right? That trust is absolutely critical, right? It's table stakes. Now, but when it comes to new ways to whether it's agentic payment, agentic commerce, right? And particularly when you also think about it in a context of launching stablecoins, launching L1s, these new payment protocols, there always been a sort of a tug of war to find the balance between trust and safety, performance, costs, and a few hosts of other things, right? And I think that kind of comes back to the problem of, well, maybe because none of these were designed to be sort of the agent native protocol, right? So there's always been sort of this need for the truly AI agent native protocol to actually, so to essentially, you don't no longer have to sacrifice performance for trust and safety, or vice versa. And you can actually find, have your cake and eat it too in this case, right? So that's something I think whoever is building this space absolutely needs to think about. A protocol that's truly purpose built for this very use case.
Yeah, that's also struck to me as well in terms of the trust itself. That's also why, initially we call kites, underlying we're using like blockchain-based technology and all this stuff, but we call what we are building is actually a programmable trust infrastructure for the future agentic internet, which again is the very fundamental like a base for any financial related or any identification related activities that we need there. So I know that we are at the time, and I know, Jesse, thank you so much. I know you probably have something that you need to run into. But before we go, any last sentence that you guys want to share with the audience that, you felt like, there's some wisdom you want to share?
I don't know about wisdom, but I'll number one, thanks for having me on. It's just always, I think, super exciting to have these types of conversations. It's such a great opportunity also to learn. We're moving so fast in this space that you have to have these kinds of conversations in order to even try to keep up. For you all, I know you guys are building an amazing company. Excited to be a small part of that. And for those that are listening, I think it's really it's an exciting time to be in this space, kind of leveraging or grabbing onto the fact that in many ways we are actually building a tangible, real future, right? This is not a theoretical. We're seeing the benefits of these in our daily lives in the way that we leverage these tools to do our meeting notes, summaries, and all of the great use cases I'm certain everyone is doing. And it's going to take the work of people like you all and those that are listening to kind of build that connectivity, that interoperability, to define the bounds of the system, and then also build the things that get us there to actually deliver this future. So, be encouraged, be excited, and keep learning, because there's going to be so much that comes out in the next weeks, months, and years that will continue to advance our ability to build this future that I think we all want. So it's exciting times. I really appreciate the opportunity to come and have these kinds of conversations.
Very, very well said, JC. Couldn't agree more. I'll just add one point, just to the builders, developers, the consumers, the businesses. Start thinking about this now. The best time to think about this was probably a year, 2 years ago, but the second best time is now, because this is moving at a speed that we've not seen before. Right? We can start preparing for this, and it's also a collaborative effort, right? Start reaching out to Scott and Chi, and others building the space. It's going to take a large ecosystem and the collective effort of that ecosystem to make this a reality.
Scott, anything you want to share before we go?
Yeah, I'm super excited for this agentic future. Being a developer of last 15 years and then started coding like since earlier 2005. I think this is comparing to internet area, comparing to mobile, comparing to cloud, and then blockchain. I think agentic future is actually one of the most exciting future for developer and then for builder in this case. It's bigger than any of the previous area, and then this is actually one of the most super excited time to live on. And then that's why, as Sam Altman said in YC Startup School, like now it's actually the best time ever to start a company, to start build. Yeah.
Very well said. Very well said.
Do more.
Thank you so much, guys. Thank you, JC. Thank you, Alan, and thank you, Scott, my co-founder. Today, you guys all shared very good insights about the future and the agentic commerce payments. Feel free to follow JC and Alan at LinkedIn and Twitter, and of course Kite and Scott and me. Anything that you want to discuss about agents, about commerce, about payments, we'd love to discuss.
Excellent. Thanks for having us.
Thanks all.
Thank you. Thanks
so much.
Bye-bye.
Yeah.